The year is 1999. Pizza delivery boy Philip Fry arrives at the control booth of the WNYW television station. As Fry has never had the privilege of seeing the inside of a TV station before, the control operator invites him to sit down to watch the current broadcast with him, the season finale of the popular drama Single Female Lawyer. Misfortune strikes when the clumsy Fry spills beer on the console, shorting it out and interrupting the broadcast. 1,000 years later, and 1,000 light years away, Lur and Unda Unda, rulers of the planet Omicron Persei 8, sit down to watch the season finale of Single Female Lawyer, which after all this time has finally reached their planet. But when the 1,000-year-old broadcast is interrupted, they erupt into a fury and launch an invasion of the Earth. They demand to see the human called McNeil. Earth President McNeil, fearful for his own life, institutes a military draft for all flight-capable spaceships and places Zap Brannigan in command of the fleet. The Earth fleet, including the Planet Express, suffer heavy casualties in the ensuing battle, standing no chance against the Omicronian mothership. After this disaster, the Earth government hands over President McNeil over to the Omicronians, who respond by announcing that the one they want is not this McNeil, but Jenny McNeil, whom Fry recognizes as the lead character of the show Single Female Lawyer. Only giving them a copy of the interrupted episode can save the Earth now, but it was filmed 1,000 years ago and no intact copies remain. All seems lost until an idea surfaces. If the original episode no longer exists, perhaps the Planet Express crew can film a new one. Determined to save their world, they immediately set about production. But when Fry's script runs short, the cast is forced to improvise. Leela's ad-libbing almost costs them everything, but in the end, Fry's intimate familiarity with the conventions of television is enough to see them through. Sufficiently satisfied, the Omicronians retreat, and the Earth survives for another day. It turns out that sometimes even the most useless-seeming skills can carry surprising utility. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
So today we have the first introduction of the Omicronians.
Oh, I freaking love these guys. I love Lur.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're a great series of recurring antagonists.
Especially because we haven't had a lot of major aliens appear recurringly.
Yeah, true. Especially, we had the. I don't think any of them have yet appeared twice.
Really, just Kif.
Yeah, Kif, which I don't think they ever say exactly what his species is, but they had the Trisolians. They had Leela supposedly as an alien, but they had the Decapodians, of course. But they didn't really do too much with Zoidberg yet. But yeah, the Omicronians are great. They're like space orcs essentially.
They're hysterical. Although what's weird about this episode that I noticed is it's kind of a suspiciously similar plot to the Tales from the Dark Side episode Distant Signals, which first aired in 1985. Because that was also an episode about this group of aliens coming to Earth and, trying to get the finale made to an old TV show.
I wouldn't be surprised if it is based on that, because obviously Futurama takes a lot of inspiration from old sci-fi series.
Yeah, knowing the writers of this show, I would not be surprised if it was an intentional homage.
I mean, there were a ton of older sci-fi references in this episode.
And you have the reference to the Independence Day stuff where they're blowing up all the monuments, but the absurdity of electing a supervillain president, which that's hinted at all the time in comics and stuff, but yeah, they actually managed to do it canonically, at least in Futurama.
Yeah, the Independence Day shot is an extremely obvious joke, but the fact that they follow it up with this miniature spaceship showing up and destroying Fry's sandcastle makes it hysterical.
I thought it would have been funny if, instead of knocking over the Leaning Tower, they made it stand upright.
Yeah, I was expecting that kind of a punchline too, although I do love what they have on Monument Beach, because, you've got the Sphinx, you've got the Big Ben Clock Tower, the White House, Mount Rushmore, the Easter Island Heads, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and Randy's Donuts from Inglewood, California.
Of course, yeah.
Those must be some damn good donuts.
It's an iconic building. It's been homaged a lot. The Lard Lad in The Simpsons is a reference to both that and also Bob's Big Boy.
Was that the one in Iron Man?
I believe I'm not sure if that is Randy's Donuts, but it at least not if it's not Randy's Donuts, it is an homage to it because it is a very iconic building for a restaurant at least.
So let's talk about the scene in the 20th century. I love the joke of Fry saying like, "This is a real TV station, huh?" And the operator's like, "Well, it's a Fox affiliate."
Just always, they love making fun of Fox on Fox. It's like, who else are they gonna make fun of? Really, you can't make fun of other networks. At least when you're making fun of yourself, you're still mentioning yourself. If you mention another network, you're giving them free advertising.
Although I do take issue with them saying it's a Fox affiliate because WNYW is actually Fox's flagship station.
It's lies, I tell you.
Right, Single Female Lawyer is essentially Ally McBeal, which I didn't watch a whole lot of. It seemed like the kind of show that I might have been into it if there were more of her, like, her daydreams, her hallucinations that she has, but no, it really just kind of became this kind of dull melodrama that was just, I was not in the target audience for that sort of thing at the time.
Yeah, well, they have Ally McBeal, and Futurama has Jenny McNeil. And there are some good jokes from that one scene we see of it, like the court reporter recording their conversation in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great gag.
Yeah, which, I mean, with Ally McBeal, I believe they did have a gender-neutral bathroom, or a unisex bathroom. So
did you notice that when Lur and Inda are first introduced, they're wearing casual clothes that we will never see them in again?
No, because they're just relaxing. But if he's got to address the president of another planet, he's got to look his best.
Well, it's just because they're sitting around watching TV, and Lur is naked, and Inda's in a pink sports bra. And in future episodes, even when we see them at home in future episodes, Lur always has his cape, and Inda always has her purple outfit and crown.
They want to look nice.
I guess they decided to settle on the standardized design.
Yeah.
It's just weird that they have the casual outfits here and never again. Actually, Fry has another line that I take a little issue with, where he's like, "This is HD TV. It's got better resolution than the real world." What was HD in 1999?
No, HD was a relatively new thing because a lot of people were talking about it's an HD TV. It looks amazing. It's amazing, like 40 FPS signal and stuff. It's like,
it must have been like 720p at the time.
Because like they talked about how Discovery Channel was in HD and it looks like super realistic because it was like broadcasted, and you get it like when you see the ones in the appliance store, they're showing like animal footage and it looks like you like reach out and grab the damn things. But yeah, they were really pushing how much of a big leap forward HD was, and now we're up to like 4K HD, which is like 4,000.
There's 8K.
Yeah, there's 8K now.
Yeah. It's not a standard, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't even see the point, because on average, the human eye can't really even tell the difference between 1080 and 4K.
It's a matter of nuance at a certain point. If you are going to broadcast it on a huge TV, like the size of a freaking movie screen, it does need to be a larger resolution, but yeah.
Well, it's just because, like, on an average-sized TV, you can really only tell the difference on, like, this very narrow band outside of, like, the direct center of your line of vision.
Right.
So for most of the screen, it's not even going to look any different, so I don't even see the point of a 4K TV.
The point of the 4K TV is to sell TVs. Most people don't really look into what the real threshold is or what they're able to notice the difference of. It's just more resolution means better looking stuff, and a lot of it is the placebo effect. And unfortunately, that's just who they target. They target the people that that have the disposable income but don't really going to look into whether they need it or not. They want a new big TV, and there you go. And that's who they target at, and especially when you have cars driving by outside your window.
Yeah, I guess it's like the same kind of people who like like the gamers TM who push for like 120 and 240 FPS when really again on average it's around like 90 100 FPS. It becomes really difficult if not impossible to tell the difference anymore.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And all it really does, it's bragging rights, and it's like it really stresses your graphics card.
Yeah, same with realistic graphics.
But honestly, if they're into that sort of thing, if they're trying to achieve the highest FPS that they can get, and it's not really hurting anybody else, okay, sure, go for that. If that's how you want to spend your money, go ahead.
Like I'm fine with a solid 60 or depending on the game 30 as long as it doesn't drop below that.
Yeah, the only problem I have is if it's an inconsistent frame rate. If it is really low and that it's noticeable, but a 60 FPS is fine for me. I don't really, and at a certain point, it actually becomes rather difficult to watch because if they can't integrate motion blur correctly, then it causes you to have headaches because it is so artificial. It's just like when you're trying to look into a 3D TV, but your mind isn't set up, your eyes aren't set up to receive it in the right way. It can cause headaches. So.
Yeah, I generally don't like 3D for that reason. I can only do it for a couple minutes at a time.
And I like it in concept. It's just not there in terms of execution.
I don't know why. I've never been bothered by 3D stuff that much.
A lot of it is very much dependent on the individual.
Yeah. Anyway.
This has been a very long tangent, but I don't mind because I actually don't have a whole lot to say about this episode.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward episode, honestly. It's a funny episode. It's got a decent enough premise. I really like the Omicronians, but it really kind of wraps up, again, they mentioned this, where it just kind of wraps up and everything's back to the status quo when it is absolutely not. Everything is destroyed, and I'm sure it'll be fixed by the beginning of the next episode.
Yeah, I really like that ending. Fry's just like, at the end of the episode, everything's always right back to normal, and he says the city is burning around him.
But of course, he does have a good comment where how he talks about fans or people who watch TV don't want to see things that are unexpected because it makes them scared. And it's like she can't be a single female lawyer if she's married and she's not a lawyer.
See, I hate that assumption.
Yeah.
Just because people are smarter than you give them credit for.
True, but the series is, for the record, the series is called Single Female Lawyer.
This is true, but sometimes the title can be an artifact. Like I mentioned this last week with the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. By the 4th season, she is receiving psychological help and getting medication.
Good for her.
And by the end of the show, it's all about her trying to get help and trying to interrogate why she's so obsessing over this guy and getting over him. And the title is by that point very much an artifact. But my point is, shows have done this before.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, though,
But when you have someone who is so violent, I'm sorry for talking over you, but when you have someone who is so violent like the Omicronians, you want to just appease them, really.
With the unexpected in TV shows, plot twists, it need to be something that you can look back and go, oh, I see. But
yeah,
in recent years, shows, movies have been taking it to be completely unexpected.
Yeah, exactly.
And that makes it so much less satisfying.
Yeah, just being unexpected doesn't necessarily make it good. It has to be unexpected, but it also makes sense. So the fact that she would just announce that she's getting married, that really does fly in the face of everything that was established up to that point, which, is part of the joke. They're doing these things that this show hasn't been on the air in 1,000 years, so they don't even know what they were supposed to do. But I do really like Fry's comment that it took an hour to write. I figured it would take an hour to read. As someone who has written scripts, I feel that really hard. It is so freaking hard to come up with good writing that if you're trying to write for a particular time period, time slot.
TZ, you've seen 24, right?
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, that is. I really respect the ability to time things out so carefully in a show like that.
Well, it's not what I'm talking about necessarily. What I'm referring to is with the whole subject of twists being foreshadowed, where from what I have heard, they don't. Every season has to have some traitor, but they rarely would plan out who it was ahead of time. Like, they would decide only when they get to that point. But they would deliberately put in potential foreshadowing for every potential character to be the traitor. That way, no matter who it is, it makes sense.
Which is a good way of doing it. You don't have to plan these things out from the beginning. You just have to make it seem like they were planned from the beginning. Like, you do see this with a lot of stuff. You see, in many cases, they come up with this idea and that would be interesting, but they don't really do much with it until they decide to do something with it. You see this in, like, Borderlands or things. It's like, a lot of the writing in Borderlands, it seems like it was planned from the start. And if it wasn't planned from the start, it's just they had these ideas that they decided to do something with it. And of course, we mentioned this before with early Futurama stuff, where they set up these ideas, and whether they do something with it or not, that's up to the whims of the writers, or how they decide if the characters end up being likable, or if they're popular, they do more with them.
Kingdom Hearts. Like, that is like the ultimate example of writing by the seat of your pants, but making sure that everything you do is following up on some small thing that you seeded earlier, so that no matter what you do, it feels like it was all completely planned out. Like, all of the craziest, most unpredictable plot twists in Kingdom Hearts, it's always like, you go back and it's like, oh my god, there are hints for this in, like, the past 6 games. Because he makes sure to tie it in with all of this previous stuff, and it's nuts, and it's, like, that's why I love following that series, because it is just a wild ride. But really, Fry's whole thing about saying TV audiences don't want to see anything original, they want to see the same thing they've seen 1,000 times before, they don't want anything unexpected, they don't want anything clever. It's just ironic and doubly funny in our current era of, peak TV, with just the serious character dramas, the complex serialized streaming shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course you get a sense that when he's saying that, it's the writers kind of being cynical about things. It's like, the writers do want to do something unique, but oftentimes the networks are like, no, you can't do that. You have to...
It's got to be marketable.
Yeah, it has to be marketable. It has to be the status quo. And the writers are always trying to do something different, but then it's like the networks or the markets are like, no, you have to do this. You have to do this sort of thing. So there's this constant back and forth, this constant war between the writers and the artists and the actual producers.
It doesn't help that a lot of stuff is now owned by the mouse.
Ugh.
So, they're all about marketing and money, so all the franchises that they've acquired have suffered for it.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I really don't like the idea of this one massive megacorporation having an effective monopoly of like 50% of our entire culture.
Mm-hmm.
Which wouldn't be so bad if they weren't causing so many barriers to make other enjoyable outlets. So if you have like an independent idea that you're trying to develop, you really need to partner with some big network in order to get it produced, or you need to go to Kickstarter or something. But then eventually some big network is like, we want to buy your idea, and then you're back to where you started.
TZ, I need to argue with you there on the idea that, it wouldn't be so bad if not for X. Any one company being in charge of so much of our stuff, like having this one group that essentially unilaterally gets to decide what does and doesn't get made, is horrible and dystopian regardless of what company it is.
No, absolutely. I'm not saying that it's good that Disney owns so much. It's like, I would vastly prefer if there were more media outlets for this sort of thing. But the other, it is part of what makes it so bad, I guess I'm going to say, is the fact that there are so few outlets for new ideas to really come into the marketplace.
I'm not sure I will ever forgive Disney for shuttering Blue Sky when they were so close to finishing that Nimona movie.
10 months! That is nothing in animation.
Yeah, exactly. They were less than a year away from finishing this movie based on a fantastic and very queer comic, and Disney just shutters the whole studio so they don't have any East Coast competition.
Yeah, and Disney's always been like that.
Yeah, and it sucks. There's, everything's on the West Coast, and, being here in the East, it's tough, finding stuff.
Look at what Disney did to try to stop Ferngully from being produced. You'll get sickened.
Yeah, I need to look at that. I have heard, but haven't looked into it.
Basically, it was the fact that because Robin Williams was working on that movie as well, Disney felt, because he was working on that and Aladdin kind of at the same time, so Disney kind of felt that, well, if they can cause Ferngully to be delayed or not be able to be produced, then they'll have more of Robin Williams' time. So they're basically buying all the time slots in any available audio studios in the area, just so the people producing Ferngully were unable to get time.
And then, of course, they screwed over Robin Williams as well because, he agreed to take a lesser paycheck in exchange for not being played up in the marketing. And then they proceeded to play Robin Williams as the genie up in every single piece of the marketing.
Yeah.
It's just sinister.
It really is. Like we talk about evil cyberpunk megacorporations, that's the Disney Corporation.
Yeah, essentially.
Like, they have essentially ruined copyright. Like, we have all of these old films literally rotting in their canisters while archivists wait for them to enter the public domain so they can copy and preserve them.
Herlock Sholmes. That whole thing.
Herlock Sholmes, yeah, that's another good example. Although, to be fair, the Conan Doyle estate is infamously litigious in all of the most hilarious ways regardless. Like claiming that Sherlock displaying human emotion is still under copyright. I'm not even kidding. People have gotten sued over this. The so Sherlock Holmes as a character is public domain, but the last few short stories aren't yet. They're still under copyright for another couple of years. And so anything that references those particular stories, anything like that was introduced to the character or mythos in those stories is still under copyright and you need to license. And this is where the Conan Doyle estate makes all of their money. And they claim, falsely, I should point out, that Sherlock showing human emotions was first introduced in those stories. Like, they literally sued Enola Holmes over that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
There's still a lot more to this episode we have not touched upon.
Yeah, let's not get sidetracked on bitching about copyright and late stage capitalism yet again.
It's beach time!
Yes, bite my red hot glowing ass.
Yeah, Bender grilling burgers inside his chest cavity was such a good joke.
And which is weird because usually the chest cavity jokes you don't like.
Well, because they usually, have him do stuff with his antenna, and because we've already established that as a penis analog, it just seems gross. This didn't touch on that.
But, well, they had another penis analog in this episode with camera 3.
The tanning butter, and then Zoidberg putting actual butter on himself.
I mean, he is a lobster.
Zoidberg is so pathetic in this episode where he's just trying to play volleyball and his claws keep popping the volleyballs.
Yeah, poor guy.
He's trapped in in a lobster trap.
I also really liked the joke of the spray-on bikini, just because that is such a useful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could totally see that taking off. They do sort of have that. They have this...
Reminds me of Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. He had the spray-on shoe.
That was actually a script I wrote back in college. I wrote a script about spray-on shoes.
Ooh, wow.
And the whole joke was it was a parody of infomercials. The whole joke is that they were trying to avoid the fact that shoes exist. So they have this overly complicated solution to when you're burning your feet on the sidewalk or having to walk through dog shit, rather than putting on shoes, which are mentioned nowhere in the script. You have this spray-on thing. It's called foot wrapping material to protect your foot with material in a can.
Of course.
By Sesquipedalian Corp. And they almost produced this as a sketch. They almost produced this script as a sketch, but the company had to kind of shut down before they were able to do that.
That's unfortunate. Although the thing about infomercials is, most of those products are designed for, disabled people with, limited movement or various stuff.
Yeah, designed for people who have disabilities, but they're advertised for... But they can't really advertise it for that because that's too small a market, so they market it to a wider audience of just stupid people or people who are lazy or people who don't want to do this sort of thing. And that's part of the reason why I stopped doing commercial failure, because I didn't feel as good making fun of the kind of people who buy these products, because I know in many cases it is people who have disabilities.
Yeah, I recently saw on Twitter, this guy was making a video. It was showing first this infomercial of a thing that makes it a lot easier to put socks on, but like you can put socks on without bending over. And then it just cuts this person just bending over and putting his sock on, clearly to make fun of this, like, oh, it's useless. And then, of course, everyone in the comments was just tearing him to shreds, pointing out that, like, this would be really a lifesaver for someone who has limited mobility and can't bend over.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that would have helped my grandmother.
Yeah, that's really, and it's really this unspoken thing about, a lot of these infomercials are intended for those kind of things, but we really are getting off track a bit more. But I guess it makes sense because, like you said, this episode was fairly anemic. There wasn't too much to this one other than the introduction of the Omicronians, who were great.
They are. You mentioned Zoidberg caught in the lobster trap earlier. I love the gag of Bender freeing him, and you get the siren and spotlights like it's a prison break.
I liked when they were running away, they're slow because of the water pressure.
Yeah, water resistance getting in the way. That's a nice touch.
You have bubbles coming out of Bender's mouth at one point when he's underwater. I was like, wait, why?
I mean, he is hollow.
I guess.
I like the professional beach ball because, like, oh my god, an actually decent gay joke. That is shocking in a show from this era.
Right? It's just a job for him. He's just he's a professional beach bully. There you go.
Yeah, Fry's, Leela's just like, hey, we can go somewhere. And he's just like, no, thanks, I'm gay. And it's just, he doesn't make a big deal of it. He's just like, yeah, no, sorry. That's such a good punchline because, again, it's just played as like, yeah, some people are gay. So we have Zap Brannigan back in this episode.
Yay.
With the most egotistical uniform that he could dress his people in.
I think this is like Zap at his best because he has so many of my favorite lines from him just in this episode.
Oh god, if we can hit that bullseye, the rest of those dominoes will fall like a house of cards. Checkmate. Just Kiff us. Oh god.
And when I'm in command, every mission is a suicide mission. And my all-time favorite Zap line, stop exploding, you cowards!
You cowards. Yeah, Zap really is in top form here, despite his egotism. He does actually do something rather sensible. It's like the most sensible thing he's done. It's like he's lost so many men, and all the aliens want is MacLeod. So like, yeah, we'll just give him MacLeod. That's like the most obvious solution to this problem. Is like, yeah, here you're the one who he ends up encountering someone who's just as egotistical as himself, and he's like, no, I don't like this aspect of you. Because MacLeod would be argued even more egotistical than Zap, because MacLeod is like throwing all these people just to prevent himself from being sacrificed to these aliens. It's like, oh, thank goodness we don't have a president like that.
Well, it's a surprisingly pragmatic move from Zap, who apparently is a 25-star general. I didn't realize ranks went that high.
I don't think they do. Well, maybe in 1,000 years.
And they introduce him as being fresh from his victory over the pacifists of the Gandhi Nebula.
I wonder how hard that would have been. Jesus.
Screw Gandhi. He's not good.
Yeah, Gandhi was kind of a bastard. Like, when you actually look into him, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's another topic for another time, since we're always getting off topic, but hey, welcome to the podcast.
And as I mentioned, all the sci-fi references, this section, this sequence of events has a ton of them, like from Fry's outfit being a reference to Star Wars.
Yeah, he's got the helmet on, kind of like Anakin or Luke.
Yeah, he's wearing an X-Wing pilot helmet.
He mentioned Star Trek.
I like how he names Uhura, Captain Janeway, and Xena. You've got 2 Star Trek characters, and then Xena, Warrior Princess.
Yeah.
And it's not even the popular Star Trek ones. Uhura's popular enough, but he doesn't name drop like Captain Kirk or Picard.
Well, note that all of the space heroes, quote-unquote, that he named are women.
Right, yeah.
Fry out here drinking that respect women juice.
Yes.
Of course, Kiff, after they blow up this thing that isn't the mothership, it's like, what did we just blow up? The Hubble telescope.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Hubble telescope didn't look like that. I mean, maybe...
No, but it's a good joke.
Maybe in 1,000... I keep saying this, maybe in 1,000 years, but I feel like that was really kind of reaching for a joke. They could have said, like, the broadcast satellite for Fox News or something. I don't know. Again, hitting on Fox.
To be fair, it's still a very funny joke. And of course, there's the bed making joke with that whole scene with Zap just being
just more absurdity is that you won't have time to sleep with all the beds you'll be making.
Yeah, just the neat bed making with the military precision and neatness. Oy.
And you guys are always talking about jokes that you really didn't enjoy. I was not a fan of the forced conscription of the robots idea.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the patriotism circuits because that is a terrifying concept.
Yeah.
They're robots, but still, I don't like that idea. That hits a little bit too close to home.
Yeah, that immediate subversion of free will for the sake of drafting people, that is just terrifying.
And like Leela seemed to be fine with it, like the fact that anybody with a ship is now drafted, and anybody without a ship is encouraged to fire into the air, which is just that sounds like a Zap thing. But yeah, that's just a terrifying idea that the robots are forced into it, and the robots are fine with it. It's just patriotism.
Well, I suppose if it's normalized, but yeah, it really is.
Bender wasn't happy.
Of course not. Well, Bender's never happy.
Well, he's happy when he's stealing and drinking.
And killing humans, and you think he'd be fine on killing aliens, but no. Nobody killed Kif.
Well, it's probably because his life's in danger this time.
Yeah, true. And they spilled his martini, so of course he's mad about that.
No use crying over spilled martinis. And once they blow up the Hubble Space Telescope and see the real mothership, they're like, nope, fuck this shit, I'm out. And return back to Earth.
Yeah, and, Lur demanding McNeil and saying she's an unmarried human female struggling to succeed in a human male's world. And Zap responding, maybe that's just her excuse for being incompetent? Zap the chauvinist. How is Lur more woke than him?
Well, Enda probably is... probably can hold up with his crap. I mean, they don't give her a lot of personality in this, but they do really, in later episodes, they do kind of show that she is just as capable and strong as him. She doesn't take any of his crap, and they really kind of respect each other for that whole thing.
Yeah, they're a surprisingly good couple.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like the joke that last time the aliens came, they forced the smartest of the people to breed incessantly. And he's just, oh dear, I need to prepare myself for this time. He's spraying himself with the Banaka.
Yeah, no, this time Lur wants to raise your planet's temperature by 1 million degrees a day for 5 days. Seems redundant at that point.
Well, they don't know how much humans can take.
I suppose.
One thing, there was a certain continuity issue with the videotapes, saying so many of them had been destroyed, while in a previous episode, Fry acquired several videotapes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, well, they did say that most of them were destroyed, so I guess he was able to save... They were able to save the real shows, but not the fake shows, I guess. They were able to save, like, Sanford and Son, but...
I do like the joke that they were damaged during the second coming of Jesus. And, like, that's just an offhand
That's just
thing.
a throwaway. It's just the throwaway that this Jesus came back.
Yeah, that's a good joke. But with all of those videotapes being damaged and, like, no copies existing anymore, God, that is the nightmare scenario. Like, I know you two are aware, but I don't know how much our listeners are aware, but I am very much a proponent of artistic preservation, and I believe that, like, every piece of art, no matter how minor, we should do our best to try to preserve it for future generations, because, like, when you just focus on the great things, you miss so much of the context. Like, even the crap, even the noise, that all deserves to be preserved just as much.
And in fact, it does give a more realistic vision of the past, because a lot of people talk about how great music was, like in the 70s and 80s and stuff. It's like they had all this great music. It's like, no, they had shitty music back then too. It's just we only preserve the good stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff is what you remember. But, like, I feel that, like, preservation is such a paramount issue. And
particularly with video games.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge problem with video games because, video game publishers are just especially bad about preserving their back catalog. Like, there was the whole recent PlayStation Network thing, And like I was rushing to buy everything that I could just because I don't want these games to disappear, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, and then of course you could make an argument, well, maybe that was their intention. Maybe they wanted a huge rush of people buying stuff on the PlayStation Network. Maybe it was all scams, but that's getting into conspiracy theorist stuff. Honestly, it doesn't really even make that much sense because in many cases, these things, as long as these things can be purchased, they should have a reason to keep them online because that's more income for the company. If you take it offline and people can't buy it anymore, then what are you accomplishing?
Well, it could be argued that at one point, the cost of keeping them on the servers and keeping those servers up and with all of that data becomes more than what they make from selling them. But I do think that if you're going to keep something exclusive to your storefront with no other way to legally acquire it, especially on a closed platform like the PlayStation where you need to just straight up hack it to be able to install stuff from, acquired elsewhere, then it really is your responsibility to keep it available.
Right.
Like, if you are not selling something legally, you have no right to complain about piracy. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that if something is out of print for longer than, 5 years, it should automatically enter the public domain.
Which, again, is, I'm sure would be argued against with a lot of companies, because there's certain games that have been unavailable for well over 5 years. And then it does come back, and a lot of people are like, okay, I need to get this out. That just happened to me with Saga Frontier Remastered. And then I played it for like 10 hours, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember why I never finished this game.
Yeah, I remember a while back, Nova, you had like a hell of a time trying to find that one Legend of Korra game.
Yeah, and then it turned out it was in my Steam library the whole time.
Yes.
Oh dear.
I had forgotten that I bought it in a sale years before, and I had spent hours trying to find a Steam key for sale anywhere, and I just straight up couldn't. And like, I was just curious about this game because I like Platinum Games, and this was this one little licensed game that they did years before that I was curious about, and so I was hunting for it, and ultimately it was just like I played it, and it's like, it's fine, it's okay.
It doesn't defeat the point, though.
Yeah, it doesn't defeat the point. It's whether or not the game is good is irrelevant, I suppose.
Yeah, it's for preservation. I mean, you have all those other games that have been delisted. I think the Deadpool game is still unavailable. Like, a lot of the stuff from licenses...
Well, it's unavailable for purchase. You can still download it if you own it.
I know, but you know what I mean. And, of course, you have the Scott Pilgrim game, which was the poster child for this and only recently got re-released. And it's not even just games. You also have other stuff that's caught in legal limbo. You have movies and books where it's just...
Entire TV series.
Yeah. And even cases where, like, you can't get something in its original format, like WKRP in Cincinnati used a lot of licensed background music because, which makes sense because it's about a radio station. And
yeah, exactly.
And the DVDs, they had to remove all of that music for licensing reasons. And it isn't the same experience. It's a very watered down version of the show.
That happened with the Daria series. There was so many like interstitial songs that were just popular music from the time, and they had to go through the entire series and like replace it with reorchestrated but completely new songs that were not copyrighted. And some of the jokes actually are lost because of it, because there's a scene where she's like sitting in the back of the van and it's just kind of doing a slow pan on everybody, and then Trent comments, this is like that REM commercial, or this is like that REM video where you could read everybody's mind, and then it pans over to Daria and the subtitle underground says thank God, but originally it was playing Everybody Hurts. But in the new version, it's just this regular, just interstitial music.
Like, I mean, on the subject of Daria, Beavis and Butthead, the show that it spun off from with all of the music videos that they were riffing on, and those are just gone on the DVDs.
Well, yeah, because, the license... For the record, a lot of the Beavis and Butthead stuff, the music videos that they're riffing on are completely insubstantial to the actual Beavis and Butthead cartoons.
I know, but it was still a part of the experience.
But I understand what you're saying. That was also part of the appeal of Beavis and Butthead, just them making fun of these videos. And for that matter, a lot of the videos at the time were really freaking weird. So it's a great way of preserving the stuff from the 90s.
Yeah, and actually what you said with Daria and it ruining a joke, I believe the series finale of Mork and Mindy has never been re-released or available on DVD because there is, it is central to a plot point, this licensed song. And it's not something they can remove because Mork is literally singing along to it. So they just straight up can't release this episode.
And the sad thing is, this kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the freaking time.
Like, you go back to video games, No One Lives Forever, this cult classic spy-themed shooter, which can't be re-released because no one knows who owns the rights to it. Like, I think it was Night Dive, that company that keeps doing really good remakes and remasters of old PC games. They actually wanted to do a version of No One Lives Forever, and they couldn't figure out who has the rights to that game. Like, they went to every company that could possibly have it, and every single one of them basically went back, responded to them with, well, we don't think it's worth the effort of digging through our archives to find out for sure if we own it, but we do know that if you try to do it without permission, we will sue you.
God.
It kind of reminds me of what happened with Wolfenstein 3D. When id Software developed Wolfenstein 3D, they love the original Wolfenstein, which wasn't made by them. But there's we want to contact the guy that made this. We want to get the rights to make it. But they contacted they eventually talked to they found out that he really didn't own the rights to it anyway. So they're just fine. We'll just make it. And then they met him at a convention and it's like, hey, yeah, we made Wolfenstein 3D. And it's like, oh yeah, that game's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should probably get back onto the episode because we've been talking about this for a long time.
We don't really have too much else to say about the episode, I guess.
Well, I mean, there was the joke of Crazy Bender's discount stereo.
Which, again, that was a reference to Crazy Larry or Crazy Gideon.
I don't know, man.
I like the gag of Leela having that googly eye on her side. Googly eyes are just funny.
Oh, yes. She has to have the two eyes. I like the gag where he's planning on replacing his entire crew.
And Zoidberg just pierces the eye with his claw.
And then eats it.
Yes.
Okay.
The professor reading the stage directions, cough, then fall over dead out loud, and then he goes back to sitting there with a smile.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's dead, and he feels his pulse. Like, am I dead? There's a certain joke. There really is a certain difficulty in acting like a bad actor. Because, a lot of times, these are, actual voice actors doing this sort of thing. And, they have to act like a bad actor. And there's a challenge in there. It's like acting like a bad singer. If you actually know how to sing. It actually takes talent to be able to do that.
Yeah, it can be really hard to do anything convincingly badly. Like, whether it's singing, acting, animation. Do you watch Invader Zim?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't watched a lot of it.
So the last episode that ended up airing was the Christmas special, and it introduced a character called Mini Moose. And he was supposed to have a proper introduction, but the episode where he was introduced was never produced because the show was canceled so suddenly. And so because of this, they wanted to add a joke into the Christmas special, and they did add a joke in there where a character expresses confusion about Mini Moose and seems just like, oh, he's been with me the whole time. But with that joke, they then wanted to have a montage of clips from previous episodes with Mini Moose poorly added in, but they cut this montage because they couldn't make it look convincingly fake enough.
Right.
Anyway, there's one joke in this episode that I have mixed feelings on. The bit at the end where you have everyone hugging each other in the streets, you have, the white and the black men, the Jew and the Muslim, the nun and the clown. And the punchline of this nun and this clown is good, but the setup is definitely really dated and plays into some old stereotypes of enmity.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the whole idea of Jews and Muslims automatically don't get along is just, I hate that. I really do.
Which again I assume is part of the joke. It's yeah, but even they're getting along. That they're united against an alien enemy, which is basically the plot of Watchmen.
Well, the ending of Watchmen. But who knows how long that'll last.
We'll see. So, I guess that'll do it for this episode. Like I said, the episode itself was fairly innocuous, had some great introductions of characters, but the jokes themselves, I guess, didn't quite land as much as we would have liked them to.
Yeah, it was a pretty straightforward episode, and it wasn't nearly as funny as the last few. It was still funny, just not as much. There weren't as many hits among the gags.
Overall, we give it a C+. Good, not great.
Yeah, so we won't kill you, but neither will we give them our recipe for immortality.
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your three voices of the future are Noah Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod, licensed from filmmusic.io. Find it and hundreds of other free songs at incompetech.filmmusic.io. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/spacepod3k. Follow us on Twitter at SpacePod3k. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew see how soft drinks are made in Fry and the Slurm Factory.